So, welcome back to another episode of the High Vibration Reset. I'm your host, Ciara Conlon, and in this episode, I interview Dwyer. Now, Karen runs a company called MS to Success, where she helps women with MS symptoms to stop worrying about their health, their future, so that they can get back to living their lives again. And in this episode, we speak about how she helps these women with advice and techniques and a bespoke program. But the advice that she gives is relevant for anyone with a autoimmune condition, but anyone feeling stressed or close to burnout. So I hope you will listen in and enjoy this conversation. Karen, thank you for joining me. We've had to reschedule this a couple of times, so thanks for your flexibility and delighted to have you finally here.
It's great to be here, Ciara. Thanks for asking.
Yeah. So why don't we start with you telling us a little bit more about yourself and in particular, I suppose, what led you to do the work that you do today?
Yeah. So I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis at 30. I probably had it for about 15 years before that. And at the time, I was ambitious. I was building business. I was very driven. And it was like overnight, I was handed a narrative about limitation. And I think what struck me the most about well, it wasn't just the diagnosis. It was that kind of quiet implication that my future would now shrink. And, at first I did what most high achieving women would do. I tried to solve it. I researched obsessively. I over exercised. I controlled my food. I tried to become vegan. Nothing against vegans, like fair play to you. I could not do it. Um, but I pushed harder, and ironically, that fight kept my nervous system in overdrive. And I think what changed everything was understanding that healing isn't a battle. It's the recalibration. So, after a few years being in and out of hospital and asking, my medical team, and they're gorgeous, God, I had the most lovely neurologist, really softly spoken and really lovely. But I used to think he must have dreaded when I came in because I'd say, what about this? And I read this study and I read that study. And what about that? And he would just go, oh, well, just try not to stress and go home. And I'm like, are you kidding? And look, they don't necessarily have the time to spend with people. You've got what, 5 to 10 minutes once, maybe twice a year, unless you've a relapse like myself, of which I had many. So I had many hospital stays. But I think once I got the message that my body couldn't handle the medication anymore, I felt like I was up shit creek with no paddle. So I spent the year after that rebuilding my body from the inside out and that nervous system work. A few years before that and trying lots of different things and none of it working for me. Like I failed at everything that I had tried until then. Those resources of that sport was taken away from me. And so then I started doing the nervous system work. I started, getting consistent sleep and anti-inflammatory nutrition and gentle movement. And honestly, that emotional processing and those boundaries. And my neurologist later described my scans as consistent with burnout. And a lot of the times we think burnout is a bad thing. In this instance, it's a good thing. So I don't use the word cure because that healing is personal. But I learned something profound, that the body is responsive to safety. And that's become my life's work because women really don't need more hustle. They need the structure and that sovereignty and the support. Yeah.
So that's what you've commit to turning your life over to, supporting other women.
Yeah. And sorry, I'm not very good at promoting myself, Ciara. Sorry. I started MS to Success and I kind of started it by accident because when I got the news from my neurologist that MS had burnt out, which I asked him, am I cured? He said, we don't use that word. And when I asked him if I was in remission, he said, we don't use that either. And he said, sometimes people in their 50s or 60s, the disease naturally fizzles out, and that I had that then. And so whatever I was doing, I was to continue doing. So I was in disbelief for the first while. And then I thought, God, I think when anybody has that kind of transformation of that good news, you want to go out and share it with other people. And so I published a gratitude journal, and I'll maybe tell you a little bit more about that later. But I I started getting women contact me saying, I heard you've cured yourself. I'm like, I haven't cured myself. And they were like, will you tell me what you did? And of course I do, but I'm not arrogant enough to think that, oh, just because I did something, it's going to work for you too. But I put a group together and I started running online classes before Zoom was a thing, before COVID kicked off. And then I started getting similar results to what I had had. And I thought, okay, there's something in this. So I started researching more into brain health and research, even more than I had done before for myself. And then recognized that I'm not qualified in nutrition or movement or any of those things. So I started bringing in other experts from around the world and created MS to Success. And now we're in 44 countries around the world with women getting rid of canes, going back to work, getting married, getting divorced actually as well. Um,
Something to be
but in
celebrated also.
I know, I suppose I'm celebrating both. But I think that the beautiful thing is that our clients now can identify and deactivate those things before they even arise within the body. And that self trust and that sovereignty that I mentioned before is they're no longer in fear of, they're no longer waiting for somebody in a white coat to tell them what's going to happen because they know themselves inside out and they know what to do before or needing to ask anyone. I'm not saying you don't need any medical help. That would be very irresponsible. Of course, I still take antibiotics. I have an amazing doctor. Um, but with nervous system, repair and healing, it's an inside job.
So it's interesting as well because, part of what you're saying is it's a bit about taking responsibility for your own body, your own health, and you might even say taking control. But when you started to talk, and talk about being a high achiever and trying to control the situation. So where was that balance for you in, taking control and responsibility of your own health and what you were going to do with your body,
Yeah.
but yet in another way, kind of letting go of the control? What is that
Yeah.
middle ground that you obviously have found and been able to teach to other women?
Yeah. I don't have it all the time, just to say that. There's definitely situations where I don't. But it's such an interesting thing because I say the word accountability and responsibility. And a lot of times, responsibility and control can occur as dirty words.
Mm.
Um, and being responsible for oneself. Sometimes it sounds like, oh, I've done something wrong and I'm responsible for that. But I suppose looking at it and flipping that into, oh my goodness, I can be responsible for myself. I don't have to wait for permission for somebody else. I don't have to wait for instruction for somebody else. I can take ownership myself of that. And I think it's flipping the script and making sure that the meaning that you attach to that word is a positive one and not like, oh my God, what have I done to get myself here? And then stay in that kind of fear state. But I think the biggest turning point for me, and there's probably two parts to this, was looking at where I was at any particular moment and accepting that. And what I mean by accepting is not waving the white flag and saying, I give up. And I suppose when I'm speaking with our clients, especially at the beginning, it's so important for someone to accept exactly where they're at and exactly where they're not. And that can be really, really hard and really scary to do as well, because a lot of times we can have that internal narrative of, I shouldn't be here, I should be over there, or I shouldn't have done that, and that's why I'm here. And that's a very loud noise. And it's almost like say if you're trying to go from one place to another and you're going and you're using Google Maps. In order for you to get the direction and get the map, you've actually got to be present and accept where you're at that very moment as your starting point. And a lot of times that can be debilitatingly scary to look at yourself and go, okay, this is what's happening. This is what's not. This is my desire. This is what's not working. And maybe I can tell a lot of why it's not working, but maybe knowing makes no difference because I'm not able, I'm not inspired, I'm just not doing what I know I need to do. And a lot of times that's because you haven't got the support around you. You and I have spoken before, the most successful people in the world usually have a solid plan, but then they have the support. And that's the key thing because people can do it by themselves. They can. And that's usually taking the long way. I took the long way. Our clients don't take the long way. They're taking the supported way. And that can be a hard thing to do because recognizing that one, okay, I'm not doing great here, or I'm not doing as well as I would like it to, that can be a hard pill to swallow. internally. Never mind then voicing that out loud and then going and seeking someone's support, because it's the who and not the how. And so to go outside of yourself to say, I'm not doing very well right now. I know that what I'm doing isn't working or isn't getting me to where I want to
Mhm.
be. And can you help me? Because a lot of times, and particularly women with MS, and I suppose I'll speak for myself rather than anybody else. I spent a huge amount of time wanting to make sure that nobody looked at me differently, treated me differently, because I was fighting that internal battle of, I'm not going to let this win. I'm not going to give up. And actually, in order for me to move past and get support and have me get some results, I had to go, I'm not doing great and
Mhm.
I do need some help. And that's when everything changed, is when I became at peace with and at ease with exactly where I was. And then there was a few things inside of that, looking at maybe some internal work that needed to be healed, some forgiveness, some relationships where I constantly felt like I needed to protect myself. And so actually dealing with those instead of putting them off as well was a really big part.
Amazing. So, Karen, you know, the work that you did to change things around in your own life and that you teach others, that's work that while you're helping people with MS to, heal themselves as much as possible, there's no guarantee what the outcome will be. But obviously, the results speak for themselves of all the women that you have helped. Um, but in your experience, this advice kind of works for any kind of healing journey, any health issue, because we're talking about the basics really of nervous system healing. And so would you talk to us just a little bit more about what are the basics, the component parts that have helped you to transform your life?
Yeah, it's a great question. And you're right that this does apply to everybody. We have worked with people with everything from Parkinson's to muscular dystrophy to cancer to many, many things, because a lot of the time there are some basic foundational health things that aren't happening. And I think that's for a lot of common reasons that women will find more common than most. And if I look at MS, a ratio of diagnosis from men to women, there's a three, almost 4 to 1 of women to men being diagnosed. And I think it's a huge amount to do with hormonal structure. I think it's a lot to do with how women overgive and want to take care of everybody else. And so therefore, and I don't mean this to sound condescending or patronizing. I really don't mean it like that, because I think a lot of the time it's innate that as females, you want to care. You like, if I, and I know you do too, if you see anybody in need, you want to fix it. You want to support. You want to do that. And I feel like women maybe have a harder time detaching from that because we're built as the caregivers. So going back to what I see, the things that really help, and maybe the things that add to it, I think the first few things that I did, and this is going to sound very basic and a little bit pink and fluffy and woo woo, was gratitude.
Mm.
I was very much stuck in victim mode of, this is scary. Why me? What's going on? And also, I was really scared. I mean, I don't want to skip over that. I was petrified. And so most of the time I spent my time researching, and anytime I researched, I came away even more scared again, because, you get the horror stories. I joined the Facebook groups, and with love, I say this, but most people are projecting their fears in there, or they're coming to complain or to, you know,
You were
emotion.
also a very young mother. You had two young girls and you were a single parent. So no wonder you were
Yeah,
scared shitless.
there's a huge amount. And, my career had been going on the upward scale, and then got ill, and then relationship broke down, and all of a sudden then I'd no job, no income coming in. I was on an invalidity pension, living in my mother's house with 2 kids and requesting to share a car. So it was hard. It was hard. And so, there was times where I thought, this is never going to get better. This is not going to happen. and maybe I just need to stop trying, you know? And especially when I was trying all of the different diets and trying the exercise and, everybody with love had really great advice to give. But it got to a point where I didn't want to hear anybody. And anytime anybody was giving me some advice, or you should talk to so and so, or, my mom's, I'll never forget this. My mom's neighbor said, "Oh, I know somebody with MS. She's in a wheelchair now." And then I know another person and she died. Like, oh,
Oh, cheers. Thanks. That's
they're
great.
telling me that. So people, I suppose, want to connect with you in a way. And I know they don't mean any harm with it, but a lot of times people are telling you the worst case scenario to try and relate, and they don't mean it, but my goodness, I I just started closing off, and I was probably depressed. And so when you then close off and you're not communicating about how you really are, you then have this facade. Yeah, everything's fine. Everything's fine. The voice goes up and you're doing the basics. And I remember the only thing that got me out of bed in the morning was getting my daughter to school and giving her breakfast because I just wanted to pull the cover over my head. And the thing that started really helping was practicing gratitude and writing down 3 things that I was grateful for every day. And I hated doing it. I'm like, writing it down. I know it's so ridiculous, but writing it down. And then I was doing it for 30 days, and then I was doing it for 60 days. And then there was one day, and I actually have the screensaver on my phone. I don't know if you can see this, of some flowers
Mm-hmm.
on a walk where I was walking my daughter down to the playground. She was in the buggy, and I stopped and I smelled the flowers. And I thought, oh, I think I might be getting better. I think I might actually be stopping to allow some happiness in. And that's when I started realizing that my thoughts were starting to change. My nervous system was starting to, maybe calm down a little bit. Because look, when we live in that chronic stress, the brain becomes threat orientated and that amygdala becomes hyperactive and that cortisol remains elevated and we start scanning for what's wrong. But I was now starting to scan for the positive things. And I started then looking out for, well, what can I write down that I'm going to be grateful for tomorrow? So that reticular activating system. And then I started studying gratitude,
Hmm.
the psychoneuroimmunology and positive psychology and neurocardiology, and, that show that internal gratitude practices. I mean, it even increases your heart rate variability and reduces inflammatory markers as well. And all of those parasympathetic activations. And basically, I realized that gratitude signals safety to the body. But I suppose deeper than that, it's gratitude in action, and it's really saying, okay, this is hard,
Hmm.
and I am still resourced. It's not the denial or the toxic positivity of I'm just going to be grateful for everything when my world is falling apart. It's bringing in that balance and giving myself a bit of a life buoy.
But
Yeah,
there's always something to be grateful for. That's what we start to see even within our darkest days.
yeah,
There's something good,
yeah,
however small that might be.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, as you know, I'm a massive advocate for gratitude too. And there are studies all over, and I think every university in the world has done a gratitude study and seen all the benefits biologically, neurologically, and emotionally. So that practice then opened something up for you. It opened a lot of things.
It really did. I mean, so when that like activates the vagus nerve, and that regulates digestion and heart rhythm and that immune response as well. But then I felt like I had space to go a little bit slower. So it wasn't about I have to do everything and I have to do it now, which when you're in that emergency kind of mindset, it's hard to start anything. Never mind stick with it. So I then started researching nutrition, and then I looked at, okay, well, what is it that my body needs? Because, the symptoms that I was dealing with, the dizziness, the debilitating fatigue, the tingling, the heavy legs, the optic neuritis, the affected vision, there was a lot of things. But I then looked at, okay, well, so it's not just one thing and it's not just treating one symptom in isolation. It's treating the whole nervous system and the whole human being. So for me, it was like, okay, well, asking myself, what is it that I need right now? What is it that I can do for me in that moment? And so and if I look at our program that we have now in MS to Success, the pillars that we have are mindset, or said another way, mental and emotional well-being, movement, and not the crazy movement. There's a lot of those workouts out there that are brilliant, but they're mainly, organized by men, and so they don't um, take into account our hormonal rhythms and the different seasons of the female body, and whether you've had kids or not, or whether there's bladder issues or not. So for me, the movement, it was a really important part, because what I had tried to do, and I felt a lot of shame and embarrassment around it because I couldn't keep up with it. And then what I found out is that when you over exercise and that lactate threshold, it then actually has an inflammatory response on the body. So I realized that the work that I was doing, that I thought I had to do to follow somebody else's kind of cookie cutter guidance, I was actually doing myself a little bit of damage. So I started looking at, okay, well, what is the movement and what is the pace that somebody with a chronic illness actually needs? And then started to put that into practice. Um, then what else have we got inside nutrition? And we have a few different nutritional therapists, because a lot of the time it's not actually about the food. It's about the belief that we have about ourselves. It's about the priority that we give ourselves. Because most of the time, and most women that come to me are, they want to eat really well, but they don't want to inconvenience any of the rest of their family, or they don't want anybody eating differently, or they don't want to put anybody else in a position where they're eating something that they really don't want to. In the beginning, my clients, they just eat whatever everybody else is eating so that they don't rock the boat. And what we then discovered, and what I'm so passionate about, is that I love junk food. I love crisps. I love all the bad stuff. I love wine. I love it all. But I have found ways that are healthier. So it's like a junk food makeover, so to speak, so that you can eat the same as everybody else. There's just little tweaks that make it a little bit
Yeah.
easier, so that you're not isolated in your food. And I want everybody to have a great relationship with food, or to not feel shame or embarrassed. Um, we also have self care, and sometimes self care isn't about, and sometimes it is, candles and bubble baths and spa days. Sometimes it's about having a hard conversation that you're avoiding,
Mm.
or
Setting boundaries or, yeah.
exactly that. So working on that personal development, and sometimes that's the communication of saying no when you really mean it. So like, what you're saying, what you're doing, and what you're thinking are all the same thing, rather than, I really don't want to do that, is what you're thinking, and you're saying, oh yeah, okay, that's not a problem, and then you're canceling last minute. No. We want you to go, oh yes, I want to say yes to this, but I'm going to check my diary first, or I'm going to let you know a little bit closer to the time. That has sovereignty, and that gives someone confidence, that they're not then going, oh God, I said that and I don't want to go back on that. So it's giving someone the trust and confidence to make the right decision themselves, and to give themselves a pause to actually say what they want to say and have the confidence to follow through with it. Um, and then we bring in fun as well.
And
Fun.
sleep.
And sleep. Thank you. I was
Yeah.
thinking, I know the most important one. And sleep as well. And there's a few other things that are in there. We have our personal development, a book club, which you run inside. So thank you so much for that. And we just did Rise Before Your Ball, which everybody adores. So if you're listening to this and you haven't read it, go read it.
Thank you.
But yeah, so mindset, movement, nutrition, self care, sleep, and fun. And we've got experts from all over the world, because I'm not qualified in all those things. And so the thing that I love is that somebody else might not realize that they have the same question as somebody else, and they start hearing somebody else ask that question and realize, oh my God, I've been dealing with that for 15 years and I didn't realize that I could actually improve that. For example, a bladder thing, our neuroconnected movement therapist, Bev, fabulous, has helped people reverse, bladder incontinence and things like that. Like, it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal.
And just to step back to gratitude for a moment,
Yeah.
do you find that, so you said at the beginning of that, and I find that sometimes with my clients, it's a tick box exercise. So do you find that with your clients? And is there a tipping point where, it starts to become real and then things start to shift?
Yeah. Well, I have to say, in the beginning, it is just something to do. And it's like, oh, for God's sake, why do I have to do this? And it does seem like it's kind of a fluffy woo woo, a bit LA, I'm going to practice gratitude. It's like, okay. And sometimes you really got to dig deep. I don't like doing it. Because I'm like, oh, it's one more thing to do. And then once you've done it, it's kind of like exercising. I don't like exercising, but I like having exercised. And so it's that little dopamine hit, but it is giving that kind of physiological standpoint that gratitude does that activation. And that really is where the healing happens. So when it does get to a point, I call it when my clients pop. So it's when the I have to turns into I get to, or I'm really enjoying, or I miss it when I don't. And I notice the difference when I don't. Because it's like the little energy charge, isn't it? Plugging in your phone. And you might forget to do it some days, and that's okay. But it's almost like, if you rehearse fear, you're deep in your fear pathways. If you rehearse appreciation, you strengthen those safety pathways. And so when somebody then gets into that habit of doing it, it becomes a really powerful part of their day. And it becomes that little I get to say how my day goes. I get to say what I'm stepping into, and I get to say that I'm grateful for this. And it's almost putting the blinkers on all the shite that's around you in a way. It's not to say that you're not going to deal with whatever's going on in your life, but it gives you that kind of control
Yeah,
of your emotions and your happiness. Because what is it? And I don't know how they measure these things, but there was some study done that's like 60 or 70,000 thoughts per day, and apparently 75% of those are repeated thoughts that you have. So why not actually make them positive?
exactly. Exactly. It's like choosing the lens for your glasses and just deciding that, yeah, it's going to be a more positive day. So it's the changing the way we look at things. But also in terms of putting that habit in place and
Hmm.
starting the day, gratitude, I think they call the gateway emotion.
Yeah.
So it gives us that access to the higher states
Hmm.
of emotion. It's easier to go from being a bit pissed off, being irritated to gratitude than it is to go from there right up to joy or bliss. So it
Hmm.
gives us that, yeah, that pathway
Yeah.
to more positivity.
And do you know what? Sometimes, and this is the thing, because sometimes people do have a bit of a block with it because it's like, yeah, but, and I
Mm.
always say, honor the pain first, and then look for the stability with it. So it might be, well, this diagnosis terrifies me, and I'm grateful to have access to support. So you're not stepping over that fear that's there. You're not trying to, put a band-aid over you know, a flipping volcano. Do you know? It's like honor it and honor what you're there, but make sure that you kind of top it off with something that has you come out of that fight or flight response.
And it is what I suppose a lot of people, don't like to acknowledge, but any change is a process and it takes time. So that's why a lot of people will fall down. They want it all to happen straight away. And because they don't get the feedback or the results straight away, they give up. So talk to me about how you manage that process or take people from that very fearful state, excuse me, to the acceptance of if I persist and if I keep making these changes, my life is going to be very different.
Yeah. Well, I think it's looking at it like if they were to continue, what is the future that you're living into if nothing changes right now? What is it that you're willing to put up with? Because I suppose what you're not changing, you're accepting. Um in a way. So it's looking at, okay, well, and sometimes people are happy to stay where they're at, Ciara. And this is why people have to apply for the work that we do, because there's a lot of people that are doing okay and they might have particular things that's going on and they're happy to stay that way and just not get worse. That's fine. But we're looking for the people who want to put in an effort, who want to improve, who want to reverse those symptoms that are there. And that's really important, that um desire to change, and actually that they have the belief that they can improve. It's very hard to work with someone who's overly skeptical and maybe wants to be more right than move forward. So it does require some workability in a way for someone to say, okay, I know that I can improve. Um I know that I want to get better. I just don't know how. Or I'm not quite able to do it by myself right now. I'm willing to do the work or put in the reps. And that's a really, really important part, as you know. And so I suppose the first thing that we do is, without throwing the baby out with the bathwater, is look at where people are at and what they're doing without changing anything so that we can get an idea of where somebody is. And so a lot of times people could be doing lots of great things and there could be five or six things that are taking them back. all of the steps that they're moving themselves forward with. And a lot of times people have put up with a lot of things for years. We have a client who has had MS for 28 years, and she said this is the first time that anybody has ever put the mind and the physical body together in one. She's even had stem cell therapy and nothing has worked as well. And that sounds very like, oh my God, look how great we are. But it is the fact that we look at all factors and we treat the whole human being. And that's the important part. So it's not about we have to do this step and we have to do this first. It's meeting someone exactly where they're at. We could have a CEO of a tech company who is flying, 5 times a month, who is on the go constantly, who's in meetings, who's trying to balance, being a mom, balance a relationship and balance leading a company as well. And so it's looking at, okay, well, where can we make a difference? Where is the biggest stressor? What are some tiny things that we can change that are going to bring that confidence back first? And then we can do the rest. It's not a go hard or go home type approach. And it has to be personalized to each and every person. For example, we had someone who's just completed the program. And when she started fresh, she was like, I'm just about to move house. Maybe I should wait. I was like, this is exactly the time to do it, because if you're going into that
Yeah.
chronic stress, and you're then doing that by yourself, and this person had some mobility issues, and you're then dealing with all of that internal stress of your health and then trying to move. And one of the things that we did was we put together a priority list on what needed to happen. And then we delegated that out to the people who had been saying, let me know if you want any help. Those lovely messages that you get, but you can't actually quite get your head clear enough to say, okay, well, actually, this is what I need help with. And that then like freed her up to do what she needed to do and to still have herself looked after without stepping over her own health and well-being. She's moved house. She's doing great. She's now walking out in the Italian countryside and doing brilliantly. So it wasn't a stressful
Amazing.
response. So that's what I mean by it's personalized to each and every
Mm.
person. Because if she came in and it's like, okay, do this movement plan, eat like this, do that, do that. Well, that's
May
really
not
hard
work for
for anyone
her.
to
Yeah.
follow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it has to be personalized and meeting each person where they're at. I don't know if that's answered your question.
No. Another thing that it's brought up there is that you're saying, it's when people come to the realization that they need a little bit of help, that they can't do it by themselves. But also what you've seen, and that I've seen in my program, is the power of the community, of these women coming in and realizing that there are many others just like them going through the same challenges, struggles, emotional upheaval. And that in itself is healing.
It is, because most of the time when you have that insular worry of, I'll speak for myself, not anybody else, but I had so much shame and so much embarrassment because I'd look online and then you'd see, some of the success stories and it's like, oh, so and so's done that. And look, she's able to stick to doing that every day. I am not a stick to something doing every day kind of person. I'm great at starting something for 2 weeks and then I think I'm great. And then I fall off the proverbial wagon, even though we all know there isn't one. And then I have this shame spiral or embarrassment that, oh my God, there I go, I failed again. Rather than I'm going to start doing something, I'm going to do it once a week and then I'm going to build it up and then I'm going to do this. So it, and then hearing other women in a group have the same thing or experience the same emotions, or maybe they haven't been able to stick to something in the past before either. And so then your shoulders start to then go down. You go, oh my God, I'm not a horrible, terrible person that can't keep up with something, that has spent money on things in the past and they didn't work. I can actually be heard and seen and acknowledged and supported and know that I'm not by myself in doing this and know that there is a way. And I know that that's what you do in your programs as well. And obviously that's what we do in MS to Success too. That is so much freedom because everybody's busy. Everybody has a life to live. And you know what? Things aren't going to go perfect. Our program isn't designed for things to go perfect. And actually, that is where the transformation happens. We want people to fail. I don't mean fail overall, but we celebrate failure every week. Every Friday on our Friday wind up, we celebrate what's your win of the week and what's your fail of the week. And we celebrate all the fails. And that is so freeing in hearing other people go, oh my God, I failed miserably at this. I didn't keep up with this. And it's like, okay, good. Now I have a giggle sometimes. I'm like, okay, 3 Hail Marys, 1 Our Father, go on, you're grand. Because we have a giggle about it, you know.
But
Because
it
it's like,
also provides for that deciding how we're going to adjust. Because this again is where I see, obviously, with all of the habit stuff that I do, is, very few people like to stick to the same habit over and over again. And even if it's, there's some resistance that we have having to do things or being told what to do. And it's having that forum to question and not give up. So, okay, so you didn't like doing it like this. Well, what can you do instead? Or what can we, switch it out for every second week so that there's some variety that suits you?
yeah,
I always get my clients to have a plan B for when they really don't feel like doing something, but at least they feel like they've had some kind of progression or growth or success.
yeah,
So yeah, so the community aspect is really important. You give them the one-to-one that they need, that support and that bespoke plan, let's say. But then there is that group aspect.
yeah,
Another thing that you and I have spoken about in the past, Karen, and I know it's been a massive change for you, is forgiveness. Because a lot of our limitations as women can come down to our emotional baggage. And even in what you're saying about, the nervous system, and with MS, it can be, a lot of empathetic women or people who have been through other hardships or emotional upheavals that find themselves with the condition. So how did forgiveness help you personally? And then, how have you seen it help your
yeah.
clients?
Yeah, and it's a great point. And sometimes when people hear forgiveness, they think like, I'm not forgiving that person because they're whatever. Look, resentment and it's very metabolically expensive, and that chronic resentment, it keeps the stress hormones circulating. And after researching psychoneuroimmunology, I always have to give myself a second to say that word.
Yeah.
It shows that unresolved anger correlates with higher inflammatory markers, and cardiovascular strain, and beyond
Repeat that
science.
again now, because I think that's a really important thing that people need to hear and absorb. So
Yeah,
please repeat it.
yeah. So, and I've studied a lot of psychoneuroimmunology, and so unresolved anger correlates with higher inflammatory markers and cardiovascular strain. And look, beyond the science, let's be real. So many people hold on to betrayals, divorces, being overlooked, whether that's in work, whether that's in relationships, parental, childhood dynamics where maybe they had to be the good girl, professional disappointments. And it's carried silently most of the time, but the body carries it too. And so forgiveness really isn't about absolving someone. It's reclaiming your own energy. And
It's
when
not
you
about them, it's about you and
exactly,
your
and
relationship
that
to your body.
age old saying, and I don't know who said it, drinking or holding on to anger is like drinking a glass of poison and expecting the other person to feel the effects.
Right,
Forgiveness,
right.
it
Yeah,
isn't
yeah,
the
yeah.
absolving, but when you forgive, you stop replaying the event in your nervous system and you free up that bandwidth, like the psychological bandwidth. So it really is the act of self-liberation, and it's not that like, oh God, I don't deal with that any of the time. I'm going through some dynamics at the moment as well. And that is requiring me to give a lot of forgiveness. And you know what? I don't want to. It would be much easier to be
Yeah.
righteous about it. It really would. Um, but it doesn't serve anyone. So, sometimes we have the identity of being the strong one and um, holding on to that without, we're over functioning. Said in another way, we're over functioning. So you're anticipating everyone's needs. You're trying to do everything to everyone. Be the good girl. Suppress your own frustration, and then feel guilty if you don't. But forgiveness really is about letting go of the need to be right about something, and that can be hard.
Very hard.
Like
Yeah.
letting people be and saying it's not my job to prove them wrong and me right. I can just let them be and let them go. And that might be something or someone or a situation. But letting that go, oh my God, does it free up? I have had clients do this. So we do a whole exercise, and I'll gladly share the handout with you, Ciara, if you want to give it to anybody or give it as a thing out. But we go through this exercise, and everybody does this at the beginning. They do it with themselves first, but then I get them to do it with anybody in their world that's maybe frustrating them or there's some resentment about. But while you go down, the first thing you do is list everything that's annoying, and say we do it with ourselves first, because we would never speak to anybody else the way we speak to ourselves, most likely. And so when you write down all of the things that you're annoyed or frustrated or upset with or whatever it might be about yourself, and then on the next page you write down all of the positive things. And then there should be at least one, the first page most of the time when I've done this exercise is longer than the second page, which is the positive things. So I make everybody write an equal amount. On both sides. So for every negative thing, you better have a positive thing to say. And that's with yourself and with other people as well. If you were going to hold the same amount of energy, you've got to hold the opposite positive as well. And so then we go back to the first page and we look at all of them and we look at, okay, well, what would it be like if you didn't hold any of those emotions or those feelings or those thoughts? What would free up and what would be possible if that wasn't there? And then, so I'm giving you a very short version of this, but
Yeah.
then with permission, we write at the top of the page, I forgive, whether it's you, me, someone else, for, and then you rip it up. And there's some science behind actually ripping it up. I invite people to burn it outside of their home, make sure that they're safe, but get rid of it off your person within a couple of hours. And then you write a letter of gratitude to either yourself or that person. And so you're acknowledging, you don't ever have to give it to them. But I did this with one person in particular that stands out. And when I offered them at the end, like a bonus thing was to give that letter. And I saw this person go red from the neck down, like they had a visceral response to it because it was with her parents. And she's like, I can't do it. I'm like, okay, you don't have to. And she said, I'll text them instead. I was like, okay. And she goes, but my parent, we never say I love you and my family. And that was in there. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to invite you to step over that and say it. And I nearly feel teary thinking about this. The beautiful thing is she lives close to her parents, and she was, it was great that they were both still alive, because people have done this with parents or with other people that have passed on, and it's been equally as powerful. But anyway, she said the next time she went over to the house, because she texted her parents and they text her back saying, we love you too. And there wasn't a huge amount in it.
Aw.
And the thing is, you can't expect anything of anybody else. That's the thing. You can't expect this big social media. Oh my God. No, you expect nothing in return, but it's you freeing yourself up. So it's not about their reaction. But anyway, the next time she went over to their home, and her niece and her brother live in the same home as the parents. And she said, my niece came up, who's only, I think maybe this is a good few years ago. She was only 7 or 8 or something at the time, and gave her a big hug. And she goes, and nobody hugs in my family. And my niece, and they didn't say anything to her. They didn't say anything. But she goes, my whole family now are laughing. They tell each other they love each other. They hug. And there was no ever conversation specifically about what she texted. But she said, my family's like a different family. And I just thought that was delicious,
Mm. So
because we
beautiful.
don't know at a cellular level what we're holding on to.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
that's the experience that I have with the emotional release work. So sometimes when we let go of the emotion that we're holding on to, bizarre chains of events start to happen. And whether that's energetically, there's changes happening, whether it's a change in your emotional state that other people pick up on, maybe a combination of both. But yeah, it's fascinating how that release of emotion can have such an amazing effect on your life and lots of people around you. And in terms then of that healing overall, so forgiveness is one aspect.
Mhm.
Are there other typical emotions that you see related to MS that people are holding on to, or is it a very general or different per person?
Yeah. And look, I think it would be remiss of me to say, oh, here are the emotions, and everybody has those, because it's, everybody has it. I might have the same people present with the same symptoms, but what might work for our
Mm.
doctor in the States who has MS could be different for the stay at home mom with 8 kids in Canada. And so it might be exactly the same symptoms. But when we look underneath, okay, well, what is it that's driving it? What is the physiological response? Where is the cortisol being driven? And then it could be other things like other things that are affecting it. But to go back to your question, the emotions, fear is the common one with everyone. Fear is the common one. And of course, hope, because people want to, they have this hope that they can improve. But then, there's many, many other things. I mean, it's probably the same with every other, chronic illness around the world. It's frustration, but some of the other things, there can be a lot of anger. There can be a lot of anger of, why is this happening to me? And for some people it might be, they might be dealing with very severe issues, and even if they're not severe, but you might be looking at other people getting on with their lives, and there can be frustration or resentment or um hurt that other people are getting on with their lives while somebody is dealing with what they're dealing with, and they don't know how to come out of that. And that is really hard. That is really, really hard for someone. So I think accepting and allowing someone to have those emotions and to acknowledge those emotions and actually let them up and out, because most of the time they're pushed all the way down that somebody might not
Yeah.
even recognize that they're there, but allowing someone the space to acknowledge them and say them and verbalize them, then you can move through them. But when they're kept down and in that little box that's hidden away, they kind of stay there untouched, and they end up being squeezed at some point. I remember hearing somebody ask the question, what happens if you squeeze an orange? Will you get orange? Well, when you squeeze someone and you put them in a compromised position, whatever is inside them is going to come out. So it's really important to let those come out in a safe space, not to sound really corny.
Yeah. Yeah. So is there always cortisol? Is it always a stress response?
Most of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, most of the
It
time there's
will
an
be
elevated
there.
cortisol, but it's usually not known. And also cortisol is not always bad. Cortisol can be really good in a lot of space as well. Sometimes it's, perceived as the baddie, but cortisol can be really, really good. And there's different types of stress. There's eustress and distress. Eustress is the stress that gets you past an exam. Distress is when that's there the whole time. But it's really like, we look at everything from muscle tension to digestive efficiency to sleep architecture to, immune modulation and regulating yourself. Because most of the time, my clients, they're fine at home. They're okay at home. They can move around easily at home. They're okay with the relationships that are familiar to them, but it's going out into the world. It's maybe knowing that you've got to cross the road, and are you going to be able to get from one side to the other without stopping? Is your mobility going to take you there? How are you going to feel in a social situation or going out for dinner with your girlfriends and you don't want to ask for a gluten-free option? Or your family is going away on a holiday and you don't know if you're going to keep up. So you're going to say no because you don't want to burden them. These are all common things that we hear at the beginning of the program, and then at the end, they're doing everything that they wanted to do and taking pictures and post them in the group. So it's important to acknowledge what someone's inner world and regular world looks like versus where it is that they want to get to, and then what's happening in the body when they put themselves in that situation, or their thoughts leading up to when that happens. Because a lot of the time it might be, okay, I'm going to do that, but then it's the lead up to that event and the anxiety in the lead up to that event that we've got to make sure that they're supported all the way through, that they're not exhausted by the time it actually gets to that.
So if somebody has MS or even an autoimmune condition or maybe even burnout,
Mhm.
I know you've said that obviously it's different for everybody and what one person needs might be different, but what would your generic advice be to where to start? What to do?
That's a good question. Um, I think there's a few different things. So look, stress is a big one. Stress is a big one, and actually acknowledging, well, what is it that's stressing me out? What, and then looking at, well, what's in my control? So making a list of, okay, well, what is it? And it might be the thought that I have a thought that I'm not eating very well. Um, I know that I'm not sleeping. I'm whatever it might be. Write down the list of all those stresses, and then look at what is actually in your control. And then if it's not in your control or you don't know what to do, well, who can I find that can help me with that? But if I was to go back all the way to the basics of, whatever it might be, and this is one of the things that most people overlook. I've had clients, so when they get to me and we do an assessment in the beginning, and they're lengthy, but they'll never bring this up in the initial kind of application. But most of the time, their sleep is all over the place. Most of the time, not all the time. Um, and it's been like that for years. So it doesn't even come up as a thing because they've just accepted that that's the way it has to
That's who
be.
they are.
Yeah. So my first thing to that is morning light. So within 10 minutes of waking, get your eyes without glasses into the sunlight, ideally at sunrise or in and around that time to regulate the circadian rhythm. That's the first thing. Um, I would then say a protein rich breakfast to stabilize blood sugar, and then hydration before caffeine. Okay, so don't have coffee first thing in the morning. If you can, have 5 minutes of intentional stillness, and gentle movement match to your energy. Don't go doing a massive hit workout and then it's going to, wreck your gut health and increase more inflammation. But then have a wind down evening without screens if you can, like ideally an hour before. But look, even if it's 30 minutes before, brilliant. And then have a gratitude reflection before bed. Like even if I'm not writing it, my little prompt before I go to bed, and this is something that Noel and I do. We ask each other 3 questions before we go to bed. What went well today? What made you laugh? And what are you grateful for? And so if he's not there, if he's in Wexford or with his boys, whatever it might be, I'll always, my last thought going before bed, unless something's going on, is what am I grateful for today? And so I've trained that muscle memory to do that. So you're reflecting on something positive as you go to sleep. So these, I suppose, practices, they regulate biology. And when the biology stabilizes, your mood stabilizes. And then when that, stabilizes, then decisions improve. And those small practices compound.
The small little habits
Exactly that.
or changes
Yeah.
can all add
Where
up.
did I learn that from, Ciara?
I don't know. It was some book, I think. I wish you'd practice it though.
I actually have it on the desk somewhere because I had
Well,
it
I
out
have
for
it on
the other day.
mine, so I'll do the shameless plug. Rise
Hang on.
before
There
your
we
bull.
go. There we go. Make sure you read this.
So listen, if anyone is listening in, who would want to find out more, you do paid assessments. Now, I'm going to be really cheeky here and say if anybody reaches out after listening to the podcast, maybe you'd give them a free assessment.
I will give them a free assessment. You just mentioned Ciara Conlon, and we will waive that fee. Yeah.
Amazing,
Mhm.
amazing. So that would be a good first step for somebody just to see what's going on. No pressure, no obligation to do anything, but just have somebody listen to them
Mhm.
and
And look,
guide.
we may not be the right people, and if we're not, we will give you some resources or point you in the right direction. But I think having a conversation to figure out, okay, well, what are the symptoms, putting a plan together, and then figuring out if we're a good fit. Um, but I think someone just being heard and being listened to and putting a plan together can be the spark.
Yeah, and honestly, and I've worked on Karen's program over the years in mindset and helping some of her different groups, and most recently doing a book club for Rise Before Your Bull, because obviously on a program like that there are a lot of changes, but Karen has it set up in a way that it's supportive, and little by little people can make those changes. But the results are just phenomenal. They really are. I mean, there are so many people, that have had major changes in their lives physically.
Mm.
Um,
I know
so
it sounds unbelievable when you talk
yeah,
about people getting rid of canes and walking again, and it's wild. It's
yeah,
wild.
yeah, and going
Yeah.
back to work and all of these things. So I'm just saying that anybody listening, if you or you have a family member or a friend, do get them to reach out, because what the changes that are happening with Karen's clients are just phenomenal. And it should be shared out there because people don't have to suffer alone with this.
Yeah. Thanks. And thank
So
you for doing your work with them, Ciara. You make a massive difference. So thank you.
very welcome. So, look, Karen, thank you so much for giving up your time and sharing all of your wisdom with us. And yeah, I wish you massive success with your continued wonderful work.
Thanks, Ciara. Appreciate you. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for tuning in, and make sure you share Karen's information with any woman that you know that has MS. And if you're not already following the podcast, please do so and share it with your friends and family. And lastly, I just want to mention that I've opened up free membership again to the Life Flow community. So come join the positive vibes, daily inspiration, weekly meditation, and monthly planning sessions, all for free to support your vibration and success. So after sharing the podcast with somebody, you can then go out and have yourself a wonderful inner day. See you next time.